All right, well, let's get started. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Derek Bailey. I'm with the City of Santa Barbara Public Works Department in the Traffic Engineering Group. And with me tonight is Chelsea Swanson, and she's in the Transportation Planning Group. So the purpose of tonight's webinar, just if you're new to the project, we're going to have a really brief overview of just kind of the background of the project and how it was developed. But sorry, there's a fire truck going by here. Okay, we're good. But more importantly, we had a couple of public meetings back in January, and we received some really great feedback from the community. So we've made some design changes to the project around the shopping center, right around Miggs Road. We'd really love to get your feedback on those changes. And we'll just also talk about next steps too and how the project is developing. So if you're new to the project, this is a map of the Mesa neighborhood. Over here on the left-hand side, that's Las Positas Road. That's the pathway that was just completed within the last few months. If you go to the other end of that path, out at the end of Modoc, the city and the county are both working together on an extension of that path that'll go out to the Auburn Trail, which is out Modoc Road almost all the way to Hollister. It's about a mile extension, and we'll start working on it together later this year, and it should be complete sometime in 2023. So turning to this end of the Las Positas path, we're planning for a pathway along Cliff Drive as well. Once that's complete, there'll be a continuous path almost all the way out to UCSB. So that's the red line you see on the map is the planning limits that we're looking at. Back in 2019, we had some design inspiration meetings with the community. We showed a whole bunch of pictures of what other communities have done, just to get a sense for what Santa Barbara is looking for in this project. And what the community really honed in on was this type of path. This is a bike path in San Clemente down in Orange County, and it's a two-way bike path. And that really resonated with the community, a two-way bike path. And in addition to the two-way bike path along Cliff Drive, we heard loud and clear from the community that more connectivity across Cliff Drive is important. So where you see all those pedestrian symbols, those would be new crosswalks. Those are most of the major entries into the neighborhoods. And as well, there would be new traffic signals at Camino, Coma, which is that street on the west end of the shopping center, plus the two driveways into City College. So community input so far the feedback's been very positive along most of the route. We haven't had any major concerns, mostly supportive. The concerns we've heard though is the configuration near the commercial area, that shopping center area right around Miggs Road. And you just look on the map here, this is the area that we're talking about, kind of right in the central part of the corridor. Now the original design concept, if we look at this is the original plan. This is a little hard to see, I know, but this is the shopping center area. So this is along the north side of Cliff Drive. That's the shopping center parking lot. Along the south side, you can see this is the canopy over the gas station, and the tap room is over here on the corner of Cliff and Miggs. There'll be a new traffic signal at Camino, Coma, as I mentioned. The two-way path would go along the south side of Cliff Drive. And that was the original design concept. The challenge with a two-way path is that there's some really specific safety concerns, and specifically left turning drivers are not always looking for cyclists on a two-way path. Now, it's not to say the two-way paths are bad, but when we get into this area around the shopping center where there's a higher density of busy commercial driveways, that really posed some safety concerns that we were really struggling to overcome. And that's the reason that there were medians proposed in the center of Cliff Drive that you can see in the middle of this image here. And that would have controlled the amount of left turning traffic that can go in and out of those commercial driveways. And that's how we would have been able to deliver a safe pathway. But we heard from the community that the medians might not be the best thing for overall circulation in the area. So that's why we've stepped back and revisited this area. Moving forward one slide. So these are the bike movements that would have happened on that two-way path. You can see the eastbound going towards City College is in kind of this navy blue, and in the red would be the westbound. So that's where you can see the bike movements would happen. They'd both be on that same side of the road on the south side of Cliff Drive. And again, I know this is hard to see, but this is just an image showing some of the collision history along that area in front of the shopping center. And if we had time to dig into this more, you'd see that a lot of the collisions that are happening in front of the shopping center involve left turning vehicles. So to add a two-way bike path to the mix would just kind of exacerbate that safety issue. So that being said, we've revisited this particular area of the corridor, and we've come up with an alternate configuration with no medians. And it would involve having directional bike lanes, and I'll explain what that means. And just something to keep in mind with directional bike lanes is the westbound bikes are going to have to cross over Cliff Drive to the north side. And I'll show you what that looks like. So if we look at that shopping center area again, this is where the bikes would be. So the eastbound would continue to be on the south side of the road as shown in blue. And the westbound would be in red along the north side. So if we look at that crossover, that's what I mean by crossovers. The westbound bikes are going to have to cross over. The rest of the pathway would still be a two-way pathway along the south side of the road, but just through this area, it would be kind of these directional paths. So if we start over here on the right-hand side of the screen, that's Salida del Sol. From Salida del Sol over past City College all the way to Castillo Street, that would remain a two-way path as we originally proposed and we've shown in drawings and other public meetings. But if you're a westbound cyclist, what you would do is you would get to that crosswalk that's proposed at Salida del Sol. You would use that crosswalk and cross over to the north side where there'd be a separated bike lane that would go along the north side of the road, past Meigs, past the shopping center, all the way over to that planned crosswalk at Oliver, and then cross back down to the south side. And if we look at it, what we call a cross section of the road, so if we slice the road in half and just kind of look at it from sideways, what it would look like. On the south side of the road, there'd be a 6-foot wide sidewalk. Next to it would be a bike lane, and then a parkway where we could have some tree plantings. And then you can see here the road would maintain that same lane configuration with no medians. The lanes would all get a little bit narrower. That's where we would have to steal a little bit of space in order to implement this. And then you get over to the shopping center side, and again, there'd be a parkway with trees, a bike lane, and a 6-foot sidewalk. One of the positives about this is with the previously proposed configuration that had the medians, there wasn't going to be any work done on the north side of the road other than where some of the crosswalks would land. But along the shopping center frontage, there wasn't any work planned. And so if we just look at an image of the north side sidewalk, that's just looking down. This is what we call a curb face sidewalk. So the sidewalk, and then this is that bus pocket that's right in front of the shopping center. You can see how the sidewalk is right against the road and there's no buffer between the moving traffic and the sidewalk. So if we go back to that other image, you can see we'd be introducing a parkway with trees, shade, and just a buffer for added comfort for pedestrians on the sidewalk. So this is an example from another city. This is Cambridge, Massachusetts. So you can see over on the right, they have a sidewalk that's done in pavers, and then the bike lane is right beside it. They've got a little bit wider buffer than we'd be able to provide, but that just gives you a sense for what it would look like. And this is up in Vancouver. Again, there'd be a parkway with trees, similar to what we're proposing, a raised bike lane, and then the sidewalk off to the right. And you can notice the bike lane and the sidewalk have these kind of contrasting textures or colors. And that would really distinguish between where bikes should be and where pedestrians should be. So I'm just going to dive into the layout. I know this is a little bit hard to see. We're going to have a full rollout strip map of the corridor between Salida del Sol and Oliver on Saturday. We're going to be on the sidewalk, just on the south side of Cliff Drive, where the sidewalk gets a little bit wider by the tap room. So if you'd like to come look at the strip map, please just stop by. We'd love to see you. But again, this is Salida del Sol. And again, from Salida del Sol east to City College, it would remain a two-way path along the south side of the road. But if you can see here where the skip lines are, that would be the skip center line of the path. So if you're a westbound cyclist, this is where you would cross over and you would begin to go west along that north side of the road. So the light gray is the sidewalk. The dark gray is where that bike path would be. And that light blue line right there just gives you a sense for where the existing curb line is. We keep moving down the corridor. This is Meigs Road. And again, the light gray would be the sidewalk. The dark gray would be the raised bike lane. And the tan color, that would be the parkway with potential new tree plantings. This is the driveway in the shopping center next to McDonald's. We've had preliminary discussions with the shopping center management about possibly making this a right turn out only driveway. This is a really difficult driveway to turn left out of just because the left turn lane in the street backs up a lot. So that's something we're going to continue to explore. Continuing on west down the corridor, this is the Camino Coma intersection. That's where the new traffic signal will be at the west end of the shopping center. Again, the light gray is the sidewalk. The dark gray is the raised bike lane. And again, parkways with trees. And when we get over to Oliver, again, that raised bike lane, if you're a cyclist, then you would cross back over and back to the two-way bike path that would continue out to the roundabout and to the beach. I am going to back up. I did forget to mention one thing back to the original concept with medians. Again, a little hard to see here, but that two-way bike path along the south side of the road, that would be a shared path. So both pedestrians and cyclists would share that space. There's not enough room out there to provide a separate sidewalk from the bike path. So that would be a shared space. So just keep that in mind. We're going to just talk about some of the benefits and trade-offs of this new configuration. So the benefits is it's safer for cyclists because the cyclists are going to be going the same direction as traffic past busy driveways. Safer for pedestrians because they're not sharing the space with bikes like I just described. Be less impactful to turning movements. And we'd be introducing parkways with trees for shade and improved aesthetics. And it'd be better for shopping center access along the north side if you're a cyclist. Some of the trade-offs, the westbound bike crossover. Generally speaking, we would prefer not to have cyclists having to cross over a busy street, but I think given the other trade-offs and the benefits with having this crossover, it can be done safely, conveniently, and there's a lot of benefits just to overall circulation by not having the medians. Another trade-off is those medians, even though they're not intended to be a crosswalk or anything like that, we have noticed pedestrians do cross between the shopping center and in the vicinity of the gas station. And those medians would have provided a refuge for those pedestrians, so they're not having to cross 5 lanes of traffic all at once. And it's probably going to be more expensive. Our engineering team is putting the updated cost estimate together right now, but because there was no work planned on the north side of the road before, even though we're taking away the medians, it's probably going to be a net increase in expense. So I just mentioned the concern about pedestrian safety and how those medians would have provided a refuge. So we have had some discussions about possibly adding some additional crosswalks in the area where my cursor is hovering over. That's the Camino Coma intersection, and Meigs and Lighthouse, which goes down to Washington School. So these are the possible places where crosswalks could go. The crosswalk over on the right, or potential crosswalk, I should say, near Lighthouse. That's the spacing of that crosswalk over to Meigs Road probably isn't that great, considering Meigs is a major intersection with the traffic signal. So a little unsure about that one. Crosswalk, possibly in front of the gas station, would be about midway between Camino, Coma and Meigs. And the Camino, Coma traffic signal will probably satisfy a lot of the pedestrian crossing demand. So we're just a little unsure how well that crosswalk would be used, but we are looking into that. So next steps, we are looking for your feedback. What do you think of this new idea? And we are going to be looking for additional crosswalk opportunities, like I mentioned. City Council is going to be reviewing this on May 17th. And really specifically what City Council is going to be doing is talking about how much local leveraging money we're going to put forth with our upcoming funding application. There is a funding application due on June 15th to the state through the Active Transportation Program. And the more local money that we put towards the project, the more points we score. And for those of you that have listened to past webinars, you know that we scored 1 point below the cutoff last time. So even a little bit more funding, if the City Council has the flexibility to put that into the project, will just help our score that much more. But there are a lot of competing needs financially at the city level. So they'll be having that discussion on May 17th. As I mentioned, the funding application for the Active Transportation Program is due on June 15th. So we're working on those applications right now. And the state budget is still a possibility. The state in 2021, last year, both the legislature and the governor in their proposed budgets had proposed additional funding, which would have funded our application from 2 years ago when we fell just 1 point short. But unfortunately, it got caught up in kind of a larger transportation bill where the governor and the legislature did not agree upon. So no additional funding was added last year, but they've both proposed it in their budgets again this year. So we are crossing our fingers and still holding out hope. But we should get the results for our funding application that we'll be submitting in June by October. And that will be hopefully good news for the community. So that's the end of the presentation. There's our email address up there, but we're here for questions and comments. If you have the little Q&A button on your screen and you want to type in a question to us, Chelsea's going to read those and I'll do my best to answer. Or if you have the raise hand on your screen too, and that way you can verbally ask a question to us. But I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea now.
Thanks, Derek. So far, we do have one question. I'm going to go ahead and read. It's how would the installation of a crosswalk near the gas station affect the left turn in and out of the main shopping center entry?
Great question. I wonder if I can zoom in on this. See how good my zooming skills are. Chelsea, is the image getting bigger?
Yes, it was getting
okay.
Bigger.
Good.
It is zooming.
Okay, so the shopping center driveway is actually right about here. So it would be probably a good 100 feet away from the crosswalk if a crosswalk were to be installed. So the shopping center left turns in and out would not be affected by a crosswalk. It's likely that left turns into the westernmost gas station could possibly be affected if the crosswalk had a median refuge island in it. But that would have to be studied. Left turns out wouldn't be affected, left turns into the eastern driveway, but left turns into the western driveway if there was a median refuge island. But again, we're just not sure what the demand will be, especially if there's going to be a new traffic signal at Camino, Coma.
Thanks, Derek. One thing I wanted to mention on your last slide, there was an email address, and the address should actually be cliffdrivePlan@santabarbaraca.gov. There you go.
Okay,
that one should work. Okay, great. The next question: can the stoplight proposed for Camino, Coma be put at Mesa Center, 1924 Cliff Drive, across from 1933 Cliff Drive, the Mesa Professional Building?
Instead of Camino Coma. And I'm assuming that means the driveway out of the shopping center that lines up with the office building on the south side. I'm assuming that's what it means.
Well, just, yeah, there was another comment, instead of at the entrance of 21 residential units in Villa Mesa.
Yeah, it's more about the access to Camino Coma than it is the residential on the south side. And I understand what you're saying. The reason a traffic signal would not work very well at the commercial driveway for the shopping center, especially, the shopping center has what we call a very shallow throat. And so that's the amount of space between Cliff Drive and the first parking access aisle. And that's basically where traffic would stack up while there's a red light. And because the red light, or because the traffic signal is relatively close to the MIGS traffic signal, it would have to operate on the same cycle length. So the amount of time that it takes to cycle through all the movements at MIGS would have to match at the shopping center. And that could mean quite a long red light. And that means that a lot of traffic might stack up or try to stack up on the shopping center side. And that would cause a lot of congestion and probably gridlock on the site itself. So the shopping center is not a good candidate for a traffic signal.
Thank you, Derek. Next question, is it feasible to try and further decrease the speed limit on Cliff Drive?
Great question. Yes, that's the intent. And we like to think of it less about the speed limit and more about the actual operating speeds. You'll notice that the speed limit was reduced on Cliff Drive fairly recently from 40 down to 35 throughout most of the corridor. And that just reflected that the operating speeds have come down a little bit over the last few years. So when we did our most recent speed survey to comply with state law, we were able to drop the speed limit by 5 miles an hour. In order to further reduce operating speeds on Cliff Drive, what really needs to happen is the character of the corridor needs to change. And by that, I mean, right now, Cliff Drive feels like an urban highway. It's a wide street with wide lanes, not a lot of breaks in the traffic. Like if you think from MIGS all the way over to City College, that's got to be what, gosh, a mile and a half with no breaks in traffic. There's a lot of opportunities to pick up speed on Cliff Drive and feel comfortable doing so. And so with this project, there's going to be some space in the street that's going to be kind of repurposed for the bike path. There's going to be a lot more crosswalks, traffic signals, the introduction of a lot of trees. Like if we can get a nice tree canopy growing over Cliff Drive, all of these features have a calming effect. And we can promote the orderly movement of traffic on Cliff Drive. We don't want to cause congestion or anything, but just by redesigning the corridor, we can just create a lot more calm feel to it, and the traffic speeds will follow.
Thank you, Derek. I have a few hands raised. I'm going to go to Wally. I'm going to allow you to talk.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to start with the last topic we just addressed, this maximum speed. I have seen on 275 Cliff Drive going from 60 miles an hour down to 35 miles an hour maximum speed. But reality is people drive at whatever speed they feel like, regardless of what the sign says, because there is no enforcement. So either you have to keep somebody all day long with a radar gun enforcing, or you have to put some obstructions, as you said, for the. But I go through Cliff Drive at least 6 times a day. I have 5 grandkids that I take to school. And between Flora Vista and the roundabout, typical speed is 50. And the approach is about the same speed when you are going towards Castillo before you get to City College from La Vista del Océano all the way to City College is also 50. And you can put the sign you want to, but people are going to drive whatever they feel like. And we had for a while motorcycle police there with a radar gun, and they were issuing tickets, but obviously they got tired and left. And people, so basically you have to change the structure of the road. And our question is, one wheels, scooters, skateboards, where are they going to circulate? On the bicycle path, on the sidewalk, or on the street?
Well, the best place for them will be on the bike path with the bikes. They'll be their operating speeds are going to be much more similar to a bicycle. So I think it's good in what we're doing here with modifying the design to create a separate space for pedestrians and bikes and you know, let's be honest, it's not just bikes anymore. There's all sorts of scooters and one-wheeled devices out there that people are getting around with these days. So that will be a much safer place for them.
Yeah, I am concerned, especially older fellows like me, having to circulate in the same space of some of these electric skateboards and so on. They go really fast.
They sure do.
And last comment is, I think that splitting the two directions of the bike path, it will be certainly very beneficial, because mixing bicycles and pedestrians, especially most of our bikers are like semi-professional bikers, you know, they like to go fast and they have all their gear and so on, and having people on their way is not gonna be fun for them. So I greatly support that. And last but not least, I do not know if you are aware that there was a big accident on a Sunday, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, on Cliff and La Vista del Océano. A guy that was leaving a driveway, and he was hit by a very high speed BMW and tossed the van 180 degrees. There were no serious injuries, but again, one more accident. So I wanted to let you know about it. Thank you so much for all your effort.
Thank you for the great comments. Thank you.
We go to Allison. Go ahead, Allison. You should be able to unmute yourself.
So sorry. Is that better?
Yep, there you go.
Okay. So I also live on La Vista del Oceano, and I'm very close to Santa Cruz, where you're proposing a crosswalk. I wondered if we could look at that portion of the street. I did come to the meeting that was at the park, and Danielle Garcia, who's a pastor at Free Methodist Church, which is right there at Cliff and Santa Cruz, also came and expressed a concern about two things with this. One is with the beautification of adding trees. That will take away parking that's currently on Cliff Drive, availed to people who come to the church. So that's kind of a huge concern. The other thing is, well, there are three things. A lot of the people who live in the housing across the street from the church cross the street to get to the bus stop, which is on the south side of the street. And they would also have to cross 2 lanes of bike and other traffic. And they're generally older people. So they may do well to use the crosswalk, but they're also going to have to cross the bike path, which is just a concern. So I don't know if we want to have will there be one of those lights that makes the bikes stop when someone's in the crosswalk? That's a question. And the third thing is right, a lot of the people who come to church are elderly. They come for elder activities. And again, they'd have to be crossing this bike path. So nothing today addressed any changes to the plan around the church, but I wonder if that could be considered.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, tonight is specific about the area around the shopping center, so I don't have the graphics that you're talking about to pull up. But regarding the trees, there's flexibility on that. And we totally acknowledge that more trees is going to equal less parking. That level of detail will be worked out at a more detailed level of design. And if there's certain areas of the corridor where once we engage with the community a little bit more, that parking is more important, there's flexibility on the trees. If there's certain areas of the corridor where parking is less important, maybe that's a place where more trees are important, but there is flexibility on that. Totally understood. With respect to the crosswalk, yes, there'll be flashing lights. And I think from a safety perspective, crossing the bike path is going to be very easy compared to crossing the road. So I think from a design perspective, if we can get the road right, the bike path will be quite easy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. Next question. Would westbound cyclists just stay on the south side rather than crossing Cliff Drive twice?
That's a great question, and we wrestled with that. Some cyclists may, and so I'm gonna go back to this graphic right here. So this is, again, this is Salida del Sol, and this is where that 12-foot wide bike path would be next to the sidewalk, and this is where we are encouraging cyclists if they want to go westbound, where they would cross. But say they were going to Lazy Acres, or say they were going to the tap room, somewhere not very far down the corridor, they're not heading all the way out to the beach. Is it possible that they could ride on the wrong side? Yeah, it is possible. We think it's generally going to be lower speed traffic. There'll be a lot of opportunity to see who's coming, and I don't think we can necessarily prevent it, but I don't think it's going to be very frequent or very high speed. So we were wrestling with that. What is the overall safest thing to do? And we still think that this is the overall safest thing to do.
Thank you, Derek. Next question. Will the crosswalks be similar to those on Cabrillo west of Stearns Wharf?
West of Stearns Wharf. Somewhat, yes. There'll be the flashing lights, just like on Cabrillo west of Stearns Wharf, except one thing we've learned, that was one of our first installations, was with the flashing lights west of Stearns Wharf. With a wide road like Cabrillo, we only have the flashing lights on the sides of the road. When we're doing new installations on wider roads like that, we're actually putting a third set of flashing lights in the middle of the road too, on the median islands. And we've found that they catch drivers' attention much better on wider roads. This road is not going to be nearly as wide. You know, this is going to be about 38 feet curb to curb, whereas out on Cabrillo, it's probably around 50. So the two lights on the side of the road should work really well here. So yes, it'll be configured similar in that respect. It's just, it'll be a narrower crossing for pedestrians.
Okay. Next question. How does this plan affect parking and bus stops on Cliff?
This plan, compared to what's been shown before, does not change parking or bus stop. Well, I shouldn't say that. There will be a little bit of parking changes. And again, it just depends on how many trees the community wants. But you can see in this area here, just west of Salida del Sol, there's space for about 3 parking spaces. We could make that cutout a little bit longer if there's a desire by the community to add parking. There's flexibility in that. But the bus stops will all stay the same locations. The intent is to get crosswalks located near the bus stops so that transit riders, if they leave in the morning and come home in the afternoon, they're getting picked up and dropped off on opposite sides of the street. So at least in the morning or the afternoon, they're probably having to cross Cliff Drive to get to and from a bus stop. So the crosswalks next to all the major bus stops will help facilitate that.
Thank you. Next question, similar to previous, do we think westbound cyclists will honor the crossover to the north side of Cliff, and is a bike bridge possible?
Yes, like I said, I think if the destination is further down Cliff Drive, it'll feel a lot more comfortable for cyclists to use the crossover. But if they're only going 100 or a couple hundred feet past where the crossover is, I think there might be a tendency to try to wrong way it. So yeah, but I think for me, I would feel much more comfortable crossing over and biking with traffic. I think it's going to be a very comfortable facility. If you can think back to those photos in Vancouver and Cambridge, Massachusetts, those are really well-designed facilities. And the other question was, Chelsea?
Is a bike bridge?
Oh, a bike bridge. No, it's not. It would be very costly. And in order to ramp up high enough to get over Cliff Drive, the approaches would have to be really long. If anybody's familiar with the Ortega Street overcrossing in the Lower West neighborhood that goes over Highway 101, if you can think of the really long approach ramps that needs to get the height to get up above Highway 101, it just wouldn't be practical to put something like that on Cliff Drive. And again, I think it would be quite cost prohibitive.
Thanks, Derek. There is a hand raised. I'm going to go to Carolyn. Go ahead, Carolyn, and unmute yourself. Hi.
Thank you. Your presentation was excellent, and I'm so grateful for the thought and expertise that went into this plan. I want to say that in my neighborhood, off Salida del Sol, there are a large number of children with electric bikes. 2 of my neighbors bought them for their 10-year-old. And I myself personally was hit from behind while walking on San Miguel where there's no sidewalk. I got a concussion. I was out of work for a week, so I'm biased. But I think that there are already a number of e-bikes on that sidewalk going to Lazy Acres. And I agree with your overall assessment, sir, that probably the benefits outweigh the risk, but I think you're underestimating the risk, respectfully. But thank you.
Thanks for the comments. Yeah, that's been our observation as well, as over the winter, the number of younger children riding e-bikes has just exploded. And that made us think about this a little more as well, that just all the more important to have a separated bike space from the sidewalk. The more we can give them each their own space and try to prevent mixing, the better.
Thank you. Next question. I live in the Via Mesa townhouse complex at Camino, Coma, and the south side of Cliff Drive. Will you put a sensor on the traffic light so that we can get in and out of our driveway easily? And will you provide some kind of shield so that we don't have lights shining in our bedroom windows?
Yes, there'll definitely be a sensor. And regarding the lighting, yeah, that's possible. Most of the lighting that will be added for the pathway will be lower. The lights that are on Cliff Drive near your place right now, they're about 30 feet tall, and pathway lights are usually about 14 feet tall. But if there is any glare issues, we'll definitely correct those. We want to make sure there's not light shining in anyone's windows.
Thanks, Dirk. Next question, how do you assess the need for the Lighthouse pedestrian crossing? I see a great many crossings.
Community feedback is a big one. We're not out there nearly as often as you folks in your neighborhood. We try to come out as often as we can and watch. My observation is I haven't seen a lot of crossings there, and I'm not sure of the demand. I think this crosswalk that's shown in the image on our screen at Salida del Sol will help satisfy some of that demand. but I just don't have a sense for people that are in the neighborhood that might be on Lighthouse that want to go directly across Cliff Drive to the shops, what that demand is like. So we love to hear your feedback. Again, I think the spacing might be a little bit challenging to the traffic signal at Meigs, but that's something we will study. And we again, just like to start with what is the demand out there? How many people would make that crossing if they could?
Thank you. Next question, when the bikes are rerouted across the street, will there be a bicycle crossing light?
Yes, so the crosswalks will have the flashers similar to the rest of the crosswalks up and down the corridor. So there'll be the intent would be to put a push button that's easy to reach for somebody approaching on a bike, that they could just reach over, easily hit that button to activate the lights and cross when traffic allows.
Thank you.
Go back.
Okay. Next question. I love that we'll be able to retain the southern sidewalk in the new proposal, and a crosswalk sounds great at the gas station. Could we consider actual traffic lights at the bike crossovers at Salida del Sol and Oliver, excuse me, or a pedestrian hybrid beacon crosswalk line, or like the one at Cairiel and Goleta?
Really good question. Yes. Okay, so a bit of a technical answer, so bear with me for a moment. Another thing we wrestled with this whole concept of westbound bikes having to cross over is, what is the best place to have them cross over? And originally we were thinking one possible location to cross back over from the shopping center side back down to the south side might be that traffic signal at Camino Coma. You know, it's going to be a very safe crossing, high quality traffic control device. You know, you can't get much better than a traffic signal. But here's the trade-off with the traffic signal as opposed to the flashing lights. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, when we were talking about, could a traffic signal go at the shopping center entrance? The traffic signals along Cliff Drive at Camino Coma and Meigs, because they're so close together, they should be synchronized so that, you know, traffic can flow through both of them without having to, or to minimize stops. I'm not going to say absolute not having to stop, but minimize stops. And again, that means that they have to operate on the same cycle length. And because that cycle length at Meigs, it takes so long to cycle through all the movements, it could end up with a little bit longer of a cycle length at Camino Coma as well. And that means if you're a cyclist and you pull up and you want to cross over at that location, you know, you'd pull up, you'd hit the button, or there'd be a sensor there for you, and you'd have to wait until there's a green light that you could cross over. Whereas with the flashing lights, you push the push button and the flashing lights turn on instantly, so there's no delay. So one of the things that we're thinking about, you know, will cyclists actually want to use this crossover? You know, there's a couple things working against us. It's added distance. You know, it's taking cyclists out of their path. They're having to cross the road. You know, it's a little bit of added time. And when you combine those two things, you know, we don't want to discourage cyclists from using that crossover. We want to make it as user-friendly as possible. So in order to minimize the delay, so cyclists aren't waiting, a traffic signal probably isn't the best way to cross them over. It's got to be something much more responsive and turns on immediately for cyclists. The pedestrian hybrid beacon, that's for folks on the webinar tonight that aren't familiar with it. It's a hybrid. It's kind of a hybrid between the flashers and a traffic signal. Goleta's got a few of them. They're a little bit more appropriate for larger, wider streets like Hollister and Old Town Goleta. And they have a little bit different sequence than the red, yellow, green that we're used to in a traffic signal. The one thing we're a little hesitant about using them in Santa Barbara is we don't have a lot of potential locations for them. And when there's a brand new traffic control device that drivers aren't used to using, there's a learning curve. And if there were very few pedestrian hybrid beacons in Santa Barbara, we're just not sure how well our drivers would learn to use them. So the flashers, we've had really good success with them. People understand how they work and what they mean, and there's generally pretty good compliance with them in Santa Barbara. So that's why we were leaning towards the use of the flashers, just because they are very responsive. They turn on quickly as soon as the button is pushed, and drivers in Santa Barbara are used to them. But that being said, we do want to make those crossings as safe as possible. So I think it is worth exploring.
Thank you, Derek. This one's mostly comment. So I live on Cliff Drive. Parking is a nightmare. Cars park for weeks in front of my home, and others. Family and friends cannot park conveniently in front of my home. There are no parking signs to note the prohibition of 72-hour limits. As well, cars park very close to the driveway. It is life-harrowing to pull out of my driveway as cars unseeable race down cliff. I've witnessed many accidents and 2 fatal in front of my home. Something needs to be done, and how will bike lanes be affected?
How will bike lanes be affected? Well, the bike path would take the place of the bike lanes. So the bike lanes on Cliff Drive would cease to exist, and the bike path would become the new place for bikes. 72-hour parking in Santa Barbara, we don't sign any of those. It's just a citywide law. If you want to email us, even at this email address that's on the screen right here, we can look at the visibility coming out of your driveway, and we'd be happy to provide you with the police's hotline for 72-hour parking.
Great, thank you, Derek. Next question, is it possible to create speed dips or speed bumps?
Good question. There's a fire station right on Cliff Drive, so it's a really important emergency response route. And for our fire department, seconds can matter depending on the emergency that they're responding to. So the use of a speed hump or dip to control speeds probably isn't the most appropriate, just because it's of the effects it would have on our emergency responders.
Thank you. Next question, with the popularity of e-bikes, could more accidents occur frequently?
Great question. Again, yes, it's definitely a possibility, and something, quite frankly, I'm expecting is going to happen. And it's not just a Cliff Drive problem; it's a citywide problem. Ridden cautiously, the e-bikes are just a wonderful tool for getting around the city. If there's a few places in the city I would like to ride my bike, but there's some steep hills involved, so I'm not that hardcore of a cyclist. But if I had an e-bike, it would certainly make cycling up those hills easy. But some of the speeds that we're seeing, especially with some of the younger riders, is concerning. And I'm very concerned that there is going to be a bad crash some point. What we can do is design streets like Cliff Drive that have separated space, so that we're minimizing the amount of mixing that there is between bikes and drivers. Drivers might not be expecting some of the maneuvers that cyclists are doing at high speeds on electric bikes. So this is the right kind of facility. It's just, it is a citywide problem.
Thank you, Derek. Next question. I was at Mount San Antonio College last week, and they had flashing lights in the roadway itself for crosswalks. Was amazingly visible. Is that an option?
Good question. No, we're not considering the in-pavement flashing lights. They because all the wiring is embedded in the lights, and pavement tends to flex a little bit and move around over time, the reliability of them tends not to be quite as good as the above ground flashing lights. And there have been studies that have been done that the above ground flashing lights are more effective at getting drivers' attention than the in-pavement lights. So just for long-term cost of maintenance and again, effectiveness, we're going to be using the rapid flashing beacons.
Thank you. Next question, is there coordination of this effort and the undergrounding of utilities? It would be a big waste of money to redo the sidewalks twice.
Yes, definitely. And the two projects do complement one another. I'm going to go back to that image showing Salida del Sol. Currently, the overhead lines on the north side of the road start just west of Salida del Sol. So kind of this area where my cursor is hovering over. Once those overhead lines are gone, then we have the space to implement this project. So yeah, we actually need that undergrounding to happen in order to implement this project.
Thank you. Next question. How will this project prevent people from turning left near the
Oh, I bet
shopping
it's,
center?
is it going in?
Sorry, let me just. Okay, looks like we're all muted now. I'll repeat that. How will this prevent people from turning left near the shopping center and continuing accidents?
It won't. The one thing that will change is that we should be dealing with lower operating speeds than we are right now. Particularly eastbound, if you're coming from like the Flora Vista intersection towards the shopping center, there is a bit of a downhill and it is easy to, and the lanes are just so wide and the street is so wide open, it's just easy to pick up speed in that area. So with this project, the lanes are going to be narrowed. There will be one lane, but between Flora Vista and just about to the shopping center. So I think the ability to gain speed and plus that new traffic signal at Camino Coma should just result in lower operating speeds through the shopping center. The other thing that new traffic signal at Camino Coma is going to do is it's going to create gaps in traffic that don't exist today for that eastbound traffic. The eastbound movement, it's fairly constant, especially at times of the day, as far as how the traffic is arriving. There's just a steady flow and it can be hard to pick out a gap in traffic because of that. So again, with that traffic signal at Camino Coma, that'll create some better gaps in traffic and make it easier to turn left.
Thanks, Derek. Just a couple more questions. Is it possible to have car traffic stop in all directions for pedestrian crossing at Cliff and Meigs when the pedestrian crossing button is pushed? Currently, pedestrian walk lights appear to be timed to correspond with traffic, which adds to the possibility of right turn conflicts and significant extra time to walk to the caddy corner.
Yeah, good question. We looked at this a number of years ago. That's called either a Barnes dance or a pedestrian scramble. So for people not familiar, yeah, I think just as the person asking described, traffic stops in every direction, everybody gets a red light, and the walk lights come on and pedestrians can cross in any direction, even diagonally across the intersection. The trade-off with a really large intersection like Meigs is you have to provide enough pedestrian time to walk diagonally across the intersection. And that can be, I'm guessing that's probably going to be about 30 seconds. So if you think about all the movements that the traffic signal would have to serve, it would still have to serve east and west, the left turns. And then if you can think about how the traffic signal cycles right now, northbound goes and then southbound goes. And then if you're adding a fifth sequence built into there, that's 30 seconds long for pedestrians, the amount of time it would take to cycle through all those different movements would result in a lot of delay. And during the red lights for all the other movements, the amount of time that traffic would be queuing up would be pretty significant. So when we studied this a few years ago, the pedestrian scramble just wasn't a good fit for this particular intersection, mainly because of the size of the intersection and just how long it would take to cross diagonally.
Sorry, I was muted. Next question, can max speed of e-bikes be regulated so as to obtain the needed help to go uphill, but not riding the speed of a motorcycle?
Yeah, good question. The state actually regulates the speed of bikes. I believe I get the classes of e-bikes mixed up, but they're generally supposed to be about 20 miles an hour is what they're regulated at, though. I've never done it myself, but I've heard it's fairly easy to take the governor off of some of the e-bikes so they can go faster than what they're allowed by state law. So that's what's supposed to be happening, is they are supposed to be governed.
Thank you, Derek. Next question, is it possible to add bike lanes for the fast bicyclists along with the multi-use path? I also vote for lots of trees, and this is so exciting for our community. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Great comment. The only place in the corridor where there's going to be room enough for bike lanes in addition to the bike path will be going downhill towards the roundabout, and for a short section of space over near City College. The rest of the corridor, it's kind of a trade-off. There just isn't enough room for everything. And once we still need some travel lanes on traffic lanes on Cliff Drive. It's an important street for driving and delivery, and people still need to get where they're going to go if they want to drive. By the time we have the traffic lanes, parking, we're still hearing parking is important in some areas along Cliff Drive, plus the bike path, there just isn't enough room left over for the separate bike lanes.
Thanks, Derek. I'm seeing one hand raised and no more questions. So we'll go to G. Chapman. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Fabulous webinar. I have some observations on each end of Cliff Drive. One at the roundabout end, I would suggest that the uphill lane, that there are 2 lanes, and the downhill lane should be single lane. If you've ever been behind a truck or even the city buses, people quickly want to pass a slow moving vehicle going up cliff from the roundabout. As I looked at it on the PDFs that were made available, it appears that there's plenty of room on what would be the north side or mountain side of Cliff Drive. I would look at possibly shifting the center line so you can get 2 lanes going uphill instead of making it a 2-way turn lane. When you get to the access into Eilings Park, which is about a quarter mile up the hill, you could have traffic merge back into 1 lane while making a left-hand turn lane to go into Eilings Park for the people that do the biking and those flyers, whatever they're called. And that same sort of issue occurs at the very other end of Cliff Drive at Castillo, where you're coming downhill off of by the City College. That downhill should be 1 lane, and coming up should be 2 lanes. Because of the problem with slowing truck traffic, slowing vehicles down, you end up getting irritated drivers on a single lane going uphill. The other issue that I see on that downhill right there by the City College is all those trees. That can be a disaster for bicyclists in the winter when it's raining and there is vegetation on the ground, it's downhill, the downhill rider, bicyclist, that's going to be a slippery surface and it can be an issue. It's also in the shade in the winter, much of the season, the winter season. So I would be very judicious with my vegetation planting on that downhill curve. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the really thoughtful comments there. I'll just respond to a few of them really quickly. Yeah, there is room going uphill from the roundabout towards the mesa to provide 2 lanes. And I guess I'd be interested to hear what others think about that. You know, one way to control speed is you can only go with 1 lane, is you can only go as fast as the person in front of you. I totally hear you about the when there are trucks going through, is you could get caught behind a slower moving vehicle than you prefer. But the trade-off is it is a way to control speeds in an area that we've had some concerns from the community. So I'd like to hear from you on that. At the other end, it really has to be going downhill for the 2 lanes near City College, just because traffic does back up from the Castillo Street intersection all the way uphill. And if there's only 1 lane going down the hill, basically you're taking that queue and it's on 2 lanes and you're squeezing it into 1. So you're making the queue twice as long. So going uphill, there may be an issue from time to time that you get caught behind a slower moving vehicle, but from a capacity perspective, we can keep that traffic moving a lot better in the uphill direction than we can in the downhill direction. And really good comment just about the surface. Hadn't thought of that, to be honest with you, and we will consider that.
Okay, thank you, Derek. With that, I'm not seeing any open questions or hands raised. So we don't see any more pop up the next minute. We can resume the webinar.
All right. Thanks everyone for your great questions and comments. And please email us if you think of anything else. We'd love to hear from you. That's your comments last time is what triggered all this. Again, we want to deliver the best possible project for your neighborhood.
Derek, there's one more hand, which we'll take, and then we'll end the webinar after that.
Sure.
Go ahead, Carolyn. Carolyn, if you can unmute.
Given that there's, we know some westbound cyclists won't cross over, and there is this large increase in e-bikes, would it be reasonable to request that there be some way where we could report accidents? Because right now those aren't tracked because they're considered bicycles. And you know, 20 people died in 2020 in New York City from being hit by e-bikes or e-scooters.
Yeah, you're free to email us. We'd love to hear what's going on out there. The police do respond to bike involved collisions. If there's an injury, they should be called. We know that they don't get called out to every collision. Sometimes there's an exchange of information or not, and people are on their way. But we hope that the police would be called to report that kind of thing. We know for the more serious collisions, they generally are. But for the ones that aren't, we would like to hear about it, just so we can keep track of it ourselves. Oh, you're muted, Chelsea.
Sorry about that. There is one more hand raised. Allison.
Hi. So this is just a superfluous
Sorry, could you go ahead and unmute again?
Yes.
There you go.
So I said, this is a superfluous comment. Wally in the beginning had mentioned professional cyclists going too fast on these bike lanes. And I think with the crossover and with all of this new stoplights that we'll be getting and crosswalks through the shopping center area, it's possible that our speeds will dramatically drop from my guess. I mean, with people stopping and slowing and so a professional cyclist is allowed to ride at the speed of the cars. They can take a lane. So maybe for a person who's going to get kind of bummed with crossing over and all that, and where they see that the speed is 20 miles an hour and they know they can go 20 miles an hour, we could have a sign that says, you know, be kind, share the road kind of thing for that stretch. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. And I think the high-speed cyclists are probably more likely to stay in the traffic lane through that section, just because they tend not to like to mix with pedestrians and lower speed users. But I think that's a great idea, just with the education of be kind and share the road.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we're no more questions at this point.
Great. Well, thanks again. And remember, the email address is cliffdriveplan@santabarbaraca.gov, not just Cliff Drive. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.